Hey, what's up, true believers? This is Agascles Stamos from GearWorks.com and the E2KG Network podcast channel on YouTube, here with another episode of It's Another Thing, episode number 7. It has been a long day. I may actually sweat a little bit during this podcast because I literally just walked in directly out of the yard from having mowed it. Which is basically the same as walking like directly in off the surface of Mercury here at this time of year. Sorry, I'm adjusting my little standing pad here. So yeah, it was hot today. Really, actually humid more than hot, which caught just everyone by surprise. So I was out thinking, I was like, I just ran like 2.5 miles the other morning. Like, it felt good. Like, my time was better than it had been. Like, why am I chugging after like 20 minutes out here? And of course, it's because it's like 110% humidity. So, and then I came in and put the Scully on, so that's probably not helping. So it may get a little hot in here as we're wrapping up our discussion on Cloak and Dagger. Welcome to It's Another Thing. That is the entertainment series podcast on the E2KG network, where we really only focus on short season format television. So things like the Netflix series for the Marvel superhero stuff, things like The Gifted, things that generally run anywhere from 6 to 13 episodes in a season. And the last few weeks, my good friend Mr. Dave Petchy and I have been focusing on Cloak and Dagger, which was greenlit for a 10-episode series. I suspect that there will be more next season. I don't know. What do you think, Dave?
I think this one, I'd hate to say it, but it's probably the best Marvel that we've seen by far. It's gotten, like, episode 7, 8, and 9, for me, put it on the number one list, below the Netflix ones, and below Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And I think it's a new model, and I hope they continue it. I guess some of the things that I love that they did was they took characters like Cloak and Dagger and they made them, kind of they're not college age, but they're high school age, but yet they've made them more relatable than I feel that we could relate to, middle-aged Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Matt Murdock. And it's a coming-of-age story for them, which it's like a lot of people can go back and relate to high school. If you're in high school, you can relate to these kids and what they're going through. And it's a new spin, too, because they've tweaked it a little bit, that you're not going to expect the same villain. You're not going to expect the same sort of results, right? They're, like you were saying, that you're usually in New York, but it's a new spin. They're in New Orleans. I enjoy that. It's kind of like The Walking Dead, how I think it's kind of good that they're adding some differences between the comic book and the TV show. So I really like that. And it was just super, like, home base, emotional roller coaster of highs and lows. Between 7, 8, and 9. Not to say 10 wasn't bad. It's just those 3 episodes hit me the most. And if I had to pick one that I felt like was the best of all of them, I would have to say the episode where they're... I would say episode 8 maybe, or episode 7 were probably the best of this season.
Yeah, and I'm with you there on episode 7, as I am just wrapping up getting out the social media to announce that we are live for any of our listeners and viewers who want to join in.
And by the way, everybody, this is a spoiler podcast, so if you have not seen them yet, please go watch them. Freeform, I believe, if people don't know, it is on... regular TV, but it's also an app you can get on your Fire Stick. I think it's on Roku as well. You can also watch it online if you already are a TV subscriber. I don't know how you watched it, I guess, Eccles, but I watched it via Fire Stick.
Yeah, I bought a season pass to it on Amazon.
Okay.
So you're right, because I don't have an actual cable subscription, so I couldn't watch it for free on the Freeform TV app.
Okay.
And I'm just trying to finish up getting situated here and have the chat window open and all that blah, blah, blah. So, yeah. So,
let's see. I'm like, it's so funny because I watched 7, 8, and 9, I believe, last week, and then I watched episode 10 this week. So I'm like refreshing myself on what exactly was episode 7. Episode 7, I believe, is the one where they're in the mind of Ivan. Episode 8 is, I think, the one. Let's see.
So,
which is the one?
So episode 8 is Ghost Stories, and that's the one that it's the anniversary of the deaths of Nathan Bowen and
that's right, and that's the one where
Billy.
They kind of both relapse.
Well, they definitely start the relapse in episode 9, but there's some big revelations in episode 8, which I want to come back to. So let's roll back, if we can, to episode 7. So we are discussing episode 7 through 10 tonight because Dave and I missed recording an episode, which is good because I don't really necessarily know that spending a whole hour discussing the season finale would be that great. But season 1, episode 7, Lotus Eaters. I'm not exactly sure. I'm probably faded on my memory of watching 7, 8, and 9 back to back, kind of like you did, and I'm not exactly sure why they called it Lotus Eaters, but the big thing is Tandy reaches out to Ty. Well, actually, Ty shows up, pops in to her to St. Teresa's in the previous episode, and that's where he shows up crying, and she tries to reach out and touch him, and they like blow each other across the room. So she's unable to comfort him. But we pick up there, and Tandy, after hearing Ty's story, and I can't remember exactly what his tragedy was at the beginning of episode 7, or why he was crying. I guess I think this was because he had found out that I think it was Dwayne, who was his brother's friend.
He could have put away that cop when he got killed.
Yep, and so he found out Dwayne is dirty and was selling drugs, and I believe this is when Connors sets up O'Reilly, and she comes in and shoots Dwayne, and then Ty runs away. Connors is shooting at him in the back, and Cloak is blinking in and out, and finally, when he blinks the last time, he shows up at St. Teresa's. So that's where we end episode 6. Episode 7 picks up with Ty explaining to Tandy what happened, and Tandy immediately turns around and says, I know it's not really great timing, but I gotta ask you, right? I need your help with something. It's fine. So this, to me, what I tweeted out when I watched this is, this to me, and I hope...
I saw your tweet. Your tweet,
yeah. I know Dave knows me. I know that the guys on the E2KG network know me. People I work with know me. Let me just table set it for listeners and viewers. I am a very mathematically oriented person. I am data driven. I like to quantify everything. Typically during podcasts, what I insist on, maybe more so on the game shows than on this one, is I will throw down hard mathematical, like binaries, like either or. Like, you're stranded on a desert island, you're allowed to take one game, right? What is it, right? No, you don't get to like mush through it. You have to declare what the one thing is. So when I make comparative statements about like A is the best thing compared to B, C, D, and E, like, I dead set mean that. That's a yardstick. I do comic book reviews every week. I score, like... So when I tweet out that this episode to me was literally arguably maybe the best episode of television I've ever seen, I dead serious mean that. In comparison to every episode of things that I've ever seen, this ranks right up there with, like, the Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode Hush, which was completely silent, as well as the Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode of the musical, the crossover episodes on the CD. Like, it's up there. Now, admittedly, I will say I have a bias in this. You mentioned, Dave, that one of the great things about this is that it appeals to people who, remember high school or maybe aren't that far past high school. It's hitting me as a parent, and my kids aren't anywhere near that old, but like this episode, I'm a dad and I have a daughter. Like the thought of being trapped in a psychological defensive grid that he had erected himself in order to cope with everything, and that grid actually prevented him from almost a decade of time with his daughter. That's a heart-wrenching scenario to watch unfold on screen. But also like heroically humanizing when you see him start to break out of it and see him like rise up and the determination he gains to get himself out of it. And I love that in the end it's him who has to save himself. It's not like Cloak and Dagger who can save him. So I really like. So one of the things I want to mention from episode 7 is at this point I really love the chemistry between the two stars Aubrey and Olivia, and in particular I prefer Aubrey's. Aubrey has a very specific line delivery, and an inflection in his voice that I really like. That I don't know if that's him or a method thing that he came up with for Cloak, because I don't know that he could have gotten that out of the comic book, and really he couldn't have because in the comic book there is no Tyrone. Like you don't spend any time with them before they became Cloak and Dagger. You just see Cloak as this completely like morose, dark individual, and so all of this has to be coming from like the showrunner and the writer staff and Aubrey. I don't know, any comments on that?
None really, because I haven't followed the comics, nor have I followed the producers or the directors.
But I mean, how would you say this chemistry like compares to some of the other big partnerships we've seen?
Oh, okay, like Jessica Jones, Luke Cage partnership. Okay, no, I just think that this is. I mean, I think this is the first show that we haven't seen sex in, right? That's kind of like because all the Netflix ones have like if there's two people, then like boy and girl, there's sex.
Yeah, this is essentially the ABC Family Channel, so that
right. So it
doesn't we did see the one scene. Obviously not anything as graphic as Netflix, but we did see the one scene with
the cop and the boyfriend, right?
Well, and with Tandy and her boyfriend.
Right, a little bit. It wasn't a lot.
Yeah, it wasn't graphic, and it won't be on this, but yeah. Yeah,
I just think it's been a lot more appropriate, and I like how they haven't made it a whole love thing between Tandy and Tyrone. Well, it's kind of sad, right? Because both of them, in the end, like, and I'm really glad they're not going for the whole Romeo and Juliet thing. Like, that's been like so overplayed.
Right.
But it's sad. In the end, both of them, started off with, a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and they both ended up losing them in the end to follow the path that they're on.
Yeah, I actually kind of like how this is playing because it's a kind of a platonic love thing where there is sexual tension there, but I think and maybe they've just nailed down that it's not going to happen because of the one repulsion that happened when she tried to touch him and they blew each other across the room. Maybe they've just grounded and accepted that, but there is still like there's a love story going on here. It's just it very much reminds me of kind of the love story of friendships that you used to have on kind of Star Trek: The Next Generation, where you didn't necessarily always have physical love between Riker and Deanna Troi, but there was always like a bond between them. And same thing with Picard and Beverly Crusher, and I always really loved that notion that you could have these friendships of love that didn't necessarily have to become physical.
Yeah, exactly.
So the one thing that just hit me right in the gut and had me bawling during this episode is the frickin' phone call.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Tandy picking up the phone and hearing her father, Nathan Bowen, just like you couldn't have written you couldn't have written it better. It just hit me straight in the gut.
Now, let me
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
always follow these things, and I think the producer, the director, did a really good job. I think we've seen the 5 stages of grief with Tandy. I don't know if it was all in this episode, but I think throughout the series we saw denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. I mean, at least we saw kind of bargaining and depression and acceptance within these three. And beforehand, well, actually, no, I think we did see all 5 of them in this episode, which was just it's heartbreaking to see that.
Yeah, you could definitely see. Well, and what's so impressive about it is it's Ty pushing her through it, right?
Yeah,
Um, and again, I feel like that's one of those leaps of a definition of a bond, that's achieved in the stroke of one episode. I love the actor, and I didn't look up his name, who plays Ivan Hess. I just feel like he's this litmus paper or something. He's like a covalent bond, like in between Ty and Tandy, that just kind of like it's the two of them. I'm having a hard time thinking. I'm sure that there's always like characters who are like the third wheel who always kind of like I don't know if you remember Teen Wolf. It's an old movie, Michael J. Fox, but kind of like it's kind of like Styles, like in the middle of Michael J. Fox's Teen Wolf and Boo. He's like the third. Well, or Ferris Bueller, right? This is Cameron. He's the third wheel. But he heightens the sense of relationship between the two romantic characters, and I feel like Hess does that in this movie. And then the last phone call, where Tandy basically says goodbye to Nathan, but maybe even more so the phone call after that, where she picks it up, pauses for a split second, and then hangs it up. Like, I'm like, gosh, man, like,
yeah.
What must she be going through? Then we have Hess eating the cookie, and sensing the taste and the smells, and trying to remember, like having that evoke a memory of his daughter Mina, and then finally the last emotional drumbeat for this episode for me was then Hess telling Tandy that she's her father's daughter, which for this episode was great. Until we get the counter drum roll of episode 8, which is what Ghost Stories, which, as I mentioned, is the anniversary. So last thing is, one of the things that was really great in episode 7 also was, and it was a neat kind of mechanism to make something realistic and explainable. I mean, it's still a MacGuffin, right? But it was neat that they were in this time loop in his head where apparently, time was accelerated, and because it loops so many times, what is it? You need 10,000 reps of a thing to becoming an expert. That they basically got the 10,000 reps of utilizing their powers inside that psychological environment, so that by the time they come out in season 8, there's a plausible reason why they are suddenly like super proficient with their powers. But yeah, the rope-a-dope for this in me was, and let me ask you, as they're busting Connors, because this is the one where they pull the hoodwink on Connors, and Ty makes him believe that he's the ghost of Billy. I didn't trust the boyfriend, Fuchs. I felt the boyfriend was in on it with Connors.
I had a suspicion about that too. And the scene where she walks into his house, I had this feeling of, oh shoot, the boyfriend's gonna get her, something bad's gonna happen. When I realized the boyfriend wasn't there, then I realized, oh shoot, something happened to the boyfriend.
Right. So, that totally caught me off guard. And that happens
at the very end of the episode,
right,
which is kind of, yeah, right? And we might as well blurt it out what happens, right? She goes to the fridge, and then, of course, I'm thinking, oh, shoot. Like, he's in the fridge, and then you see the gnarly body, which looks, like, pretty realistic, and it kind of, like, makes me jump back a little bit, because, like, oh, shoot.
Right. So in this episode also we get a lot more. We get the playback of what happens with 8-year-old Ty and Tandy. Of course, what we saw in the origin story, and I think the first episode was that they washed up on the beach after Nathan, Bowen, and Tandy went into the bay, and it's a little scary because I've driven over that bridge, and looked out into the Gulf of Mexico. So after Cloak bamps her, they wind up washed up on the beach. And here we see the play out of what happened after that. Of course, when I saw that earlier in the season, what I thought was that, they washed up on the beach, they were found by the cops or EMTs, and they were taken home. Those kids walked home from the beach. Like, they were totally lost, and no one came for them.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, talk about like the scariest thing ever to happen in your life. We see Tandy. She mentions later that his jacket is the first thing that she stole because I think she woke up first and walked away with his jacket,
which was really cool. Like episode 10, we'll get there.
Yeah, right. And then of course she also lifts a phone out of a lady's purse on her way home so that she can make a phone call. We see Ty work his way back as well and actually meet Evita's auntie, and hears her telling the ghost stories of New Orleans as well as the first time that he's told about St. Teresa's.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. One of the coolest things in here, one of the coolest hollowbacks for me was that O'Reilly mentions that she knows Misty Knight.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, man.
That was so good.
So awesome. I have yet to watch Luke Cage season 2. I need to do so, but I know that Misty, has the bionic arm, which is a thing that I've been waiting for. So that was pretty awesome.
And I guess in this episode too, we kind of see Tandy, she confronts Scarborough, has this where she could totally demolish the guy, but instead she takes the payoff, which we learn later on doesn't really last. Which of course it wouldn't. A guy like that was like, "Here, let me pay you off, and then let me try to kill you."
Right. Well, to me, the big deal too was the reason that she goes for the payoff is because she.
Yeah, that was a really heartbreaking moment because I wasn't sure that's what they were leading up to. That, and then you saw. It was a very slow lead up to the actual truth of what her father was like, and that was hard, really hard to see. I feel like I could relate to that a little bit, which was sad in my life.
Yeah, it was a little original sin-ish when they did it. And by that I referenced the Marvel event from a couple years ago where Uatu, the Watcher, is murdered, and in the wake of his murdering, all these things that were plausible staples in the Marvel universe are revealed to have been untrue, or were untrue from certain perspectives. The total Ben Kenobi right from a certain point of view. We learn Matt Murdock's father is actually abusive, and that's why the mother left. All the Nick Fury is actually a life model decoy, and all this sort of stuff. So I felt like it was
I didn't know that about Nick Fury.
Yeah, there was a bunch of crazy stuff with Nick Fury, and I don't know how much of it is stuck. This is one of my problems with Marvel over the last few years is they've done these events and then they've immediately walked away from things that they had just established in the event, which used to be DC shtick. But that's another thing. But I felt it when they did it and they suddenly cast Nathan Bowen in a bad light. I was like, man, that feels like original sin. Like here's this noble guy that we were supposed to like, and all of a sudden, right, they flipped it upside down on us. But it was interesting, and I guess it gave us plausible reason for the downward spiral of the regression of the heroes. I also felt like this was the setup for the mother to die. So one of the things that I struggle with in this, and I guess we'll talk about it a little more as we get towards the end here, is I'm still not settled that they're as far into becoming what they are in the comics as I want. I know that the CW's shtick was to take all of these heroes which had historically been alone in comics and give them families and build teams around them. I'm still of the mindset that I feel like I need Cloak and Dagger to totally be orphans and totally only have each other. And I thought that's where we were headed for the episode and for the season finale. And for this episode, I definitely felt like I felt like I was starting to feel like the setup for like Ma Bowen to get knocked off and for Ty's parents to get knocked off. That obviously. Go ahead.
I don't think they're going that direction, but I think the way episode 10... I still think episode 10 is going to have them finally leave New Orleans and be runaways, right? Because, this is jumping a little bit far ahead, but Tyrone's, still in trouble with the law, and, people are going to start catching on, they might blame the whole thing, oh, is this outbreak their problem? So they might have to just get a fresh start in a new city. So that's kind of what I think will happen in season 2. They'll probably kind of finish up loose ends, and then maybe by the second half we'll see them in a new city.
Yeah, it's really in flux, right? Because the Disney Fox deal just completed. We really don't know where they're going to go with this stuff. Part of it would make perfect sense, as you mentioned, for them to convey from New Orleans to New York, and for us to start seeing them intermixing with the Netflix heroes, because that would make sense. That they are those street level heroes who defend like the low altitude events in New York. I mean, they always kind of work in the shadows. Really, kind of like Cloak and Dagger are not like publicly known. The public's not hugely aware of Cloak and Dagger. They work in a specific set of neighborhoods in New York, and they work in the shadows, and they don't show up with like the Avengers, right? With everybody seeing them and catching them on camera. So it would make sense for them to show up like around like the Punisher and Daredevil, and Luke Cage. So, but funny, I don't know if you intended it, but you said Runaways, and I'm like, age-wise, it would kind of sort of make sense for them to show up with the Runaways, right?
Yeah.
So who knows where this is going to go. So let's go ahead and talk about season 1, episode 9, called Backbreaker, which is where, Fuchs is dead. They busted Connors the last episode. He's out. Obviously, he has Fuchs murdered, and now he's coming after O'Reilly and Ty. The word is put out that Ty is the suspect of the murderer of Fuchs. That happens as we get towards the end of the episode. One of the questions is how many cops are in on it. O'Reilly, finds the murder weapon at the crime scene, and a cop comes up and snatches it from her and tells another patrol officer to, get her off the crime scene. That made me feel like, wouldn't an officer normally like thank her for finding the murder weapon?
Yeah, it was very sketchy. Oh, the last thing I want to say on episode 8.
Yeah, sorry.
That was kind of touched me too. Was we saw the father with the drinking scene, and it wasn't until episode 8 we finally figured out what his unforgivable sin was, and we saw the scene where he had a drunken accident where he killed a young girl. So we that was, I think, pretty, like, crazy.
Yeah, and just to clarify for listeners and viewers, so when you say the father, you mean the Reverend at Ty's
school. The Reverend,
school.
yeah.
Right. So at this point, we're building, they bust Connors the previous episode, we're really building the heroes up. With 2 episodes to go, my suspicion is they're really building them up so that they can have a really big fall right before the finale.
Yeah,
and that's and that's kind of where it's heading. In this episode, you get Evita and Tandy meet each other, and in a weird thing, Tandy tries to push herself.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah,
that was cool.
Yeah, and Evita kind of fights her off.
Which was like, she's like, oh shoot, you're the one.
Right. But in the time I'm thinking, oh shoot, Evita, do you have powers? Right. So So that'll be a nice play, maybe, if there's something special about Evita as well. So one of the things, and in this episode we have this whole thing with the father, with the priest, talking about literary heroes and how all of them have this point in their story where they regress, right? The origin story is all about how they progress towards being a hero, and then the penultimate event is that there's a regression, and they forget who they are. This is Peter Parker, walking away and letting the criminal go. He gets, all his life he's been picked on, but he tries to, now he's trying to help people out, but then he gets into it for the money, and lets the, Uncle Ben's murderer, the guy who winds up eventually murdering Uncle Ben, slip by. There's all sorts of other examples. The Reverend talks about, I think Ulysses or Odysseus, or, whichever variant of that story he's telling. And we start seeing these regressions in the heroes. Tandy kind of loses faith after, she realizes that her father wasn't all he was cracked up to be. And now her new drug, essentially, is stealing the hopes of people. Now she goes into people's dreams and sees their hopes and then takes them, often leaving them in like a catatonic state, or at least impacting their perspective of the world, as she does with Mina, who becomes very withdrawn and apathetic, right? She's, she was falling in love with the bees because they were going extinct, and then they were finding survivors of the species in New Orleans.
Catch that. That's interesting.
Yeah, and then after Tandy steals her hopes, she kills a bee. So of course, and so one of the things I noted as I saw them go through this in episode 9 was, the original Cloak and Dagger, their origin story was about things that had been done to them, right? How they had been abused, and how they had been homeless, and how they had fallen into drugs. It was all about people who had taken advantage of them. But in this one, it's all about how they take advantage of others, and that they have to rise above that. Because they're really kind of, Tandy especially is really kind of a horrible human being.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. And then we start to get the turn, and we start to understand what the finale is going to be about, because we start basically seeing zombies. and I saw that happening. I'm like, man, come on. We've got The Walking Dead. We've got iZombie. We've got Planet Z. We got enough zombies. But then I was like, oh, but it's New Orleans. So it kind of makes sense that it's zombies. so at that point, I accepted it. I don't know. What did you think? I didn't understand. When we were in Hess's mind in episode 7, I didn't understand that that's what was going on. I thought that was just a fiction he had created in his own head.
No, yeah. I kind of figured out that was a literal thing, but okay. I wouldn't say they're they act like zombies, right? But they're really kind of possessed, or they call them the terrors, right?
You're right.
So they're kind of there's an evil energy over them.
Right. Yeah. So yes, I will admit they're not really zombies in the classic, but they
acted like zombies for all intents and purposes.
Right. Yeah. They're in the genre. So at this point, it gets a little hectic going into episode 9, and also very tense, right? You've got zombies, you've got corrupt cops, you've got the Roxanne assassin.
Yeah.
And as we head in, I feel like
the breakups, right? Because she destroys her relationship. She's self-destructing. Evita breaks up with Tyrone because she realizes, sorry, we're not meant to be, literally.
Right. So in a lot of ways, this felt like the best cliffhanger and the worst cliffhanger, because we get the Roxanne assassin holding a gun to Tandy's mom's head, saying, I'm going to count to 3 and then I'm going to blow her away. But the biggest thing is we get one of the big speeches from Tyrone in this episode about, how the world is unjust and how he has to stay, and how, his mom is concerned for his safety, but he's like, but if I don't stand up and fight, then my safety and my continuing on doesn't mean anything. And this
that was really good.
Yeah. So before we've had like a couple like great like for like from an acting perspective, like Gloria Reuben is like the shining like diamond of this whole thing.
Yeah, my dad, I guess he's seen some like TV shows with her in it, and he was like, "Oh, her? I haven't seen her in a while."
Yeah, she was a big deal like on back on ER,
Okay.
but but yeah, um, but that speech like they've turned Cloak into such an inspirational hero, and
Yes. Yeah.
as much as I mean, we've got Black Panther in the MCU. Um, there's definitely been an effort by the industry and I would say the comic book world, maybe more so than Hollywood itself, to emphasize minority characters and women. And maybe they haven't been as effective about women, but one thing that rung true to me after Cloak said the speech is I'm like, gosh, man, like DC, including CW, which we normally give great praise for CW above Warner Brothers and the DCEU. Um, I'm sorry. So somebody actually popped into our chat. Sometimes I forget to keep an eye on
Oh.
it. But Blue Wonder mentioned that I think Gloria Reuben was in Mr. Robot as well, who are
Okay.
compatriots over at Scene and Nerd, are definitely huge fans of. So, uh, but one of the things is that like look, the DCEU and the CW, I think almost the CW almost maybe even more, have seemed to struggle to figure out how to wrap in a Green Lantern. And of the Green Lanterns, I mean, I know Hal Jordan's a thing. It seems like from the comic books, it seems like and the Justice League Unlimited cartoon, it seems like John Stewart has been like this inspirational African American hero and centerpiece in those fictional pieces. The CW and DC and Warner Bros. They all seem to struggle on how to figure out how to bring a John Stewart to the big screen. There was a brief rumor that they were going to take Diggle, the character of Diggle on the CW, and make him Green Lantern. But I was like,
Hmm.
I like that idea, but Holmes is very close to 50, and I don't really know how you build a franchise around an actor at that point. Um, so it's almost kind of a shame a little bit that they've had that opportunity, and here Marvel on freeform TV have found this incredibly youthful actor that to me basically kind of evokes that same spirit of willpower in Darkest Day and Blackest Night, right? Um, and but then again, so it's incredibly inspirational. Great job. I'm not clear where they're going with it yet because Cloak is not Green Lantern. He is not Jonathan Stewart. Cloak is like, I'm trying to think. Cloak is a lot like Raven on the Teen Titans, right? He is a very dark, morose, pragmatic individual, at least in the comics. Um, he's a tragic hero who can't get close to anyone. He absorbs people into them, and people entering his body are driven mad. Great piece right now. Curious to see where they're going with it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Any more comments on episode 8 and 9 before we start talking the season finale for our last few minutes?
Let's see. I think we like covered a lot. Oh yeah. I mean, I guess episode 9, like the very ending, after that scene was just very intense, where the cops come after him, and the mom is just like, "Run," Um, and that's kind of like the denouement of this for Tyrone, at least, right? Because um even more so that um everybody's going to be after him. I think they all kind of know he has his powers, but they don't know that Tandy has powers as well. So I feel like that's going to set them up where, like, I honestly thought episode 10, like, they were going to warp into New York City, but I was surprised when they both came back. But that's yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, the season finale. In this build-up, as I've mentioned in the past, one of the big things about Cloak in the Marvel Universe in the comics is that Cloak, as far as I remember from the 80s, now again, I think they've kind of rejiggered Cloak and Dagger twice now. I think they're in the second iteration now. But in the comics, I'm pretty sure he was, in the 80s, he was non-corporeal. His body had no tangibility. He was kind of that black mist. And maybe he had a tangible body, but 90% of the time that you saw him, he was just this black, dark, billowy shadow. And so, I guess one of the thoughts or theories was, okay, is he going to die and cross over, but then still have present on this plane and this Earth, and that will be how we get the one of the divine pairing that is supposed to pass away. So which was
good because there was so much tension and lead up to that with Evita's aunt telling the story of each of the city's divine pairings and kind of the whole like crazy scenarios of, all right, one died and this miraculous thing happened. One died, and so I'm thinking, oh, it's coming. It's coming.
Right.
Like I'm thinking through the whole thing, like he's gonna be shot by a cop, something's gonna happen to him, Of course, like it didn't end up that way though. Yeah. So go on. Sorry.
No. So we get a couple neat things in this episode. I love the Batman-esque scene where the father sees Tyrone as he's escaping.
Yeah.
And gives him Billy's cloak, and then and he's talking to him and advising him, and he looks back at the cops, and he's still talking to him. And he turns back around, and cloak's gone. I was like, oh, there we go. Superhero stamp approved right there, right? Superhero dance, dashing away. Here's one thing I needed to ask you. So we get a reference here to the 616 again. I think it's O'Connor's who mentions that, like, or maybe it's Scarborough mentions that that the core facility is down at their warehouse on 616 something Avenue. In a world where the Ultimate Universe no longer exists, do the 616 references really mean anything anymore? Is it nostalgia? So. Okay, that's kind of what I felt like. I was like, we did this a couple times in the MCU, and I was like, great, funny fanboy out on that. It was neat. But in the years since, we've destroyed the Ultimate Universe. We've collapsed all the universes and merged them together. Miles Morales lives in the 616. There's really not a 616 anymore because there aren't. Marvel did away with its version of the multiverse, which I'm fine with, right? DC did this at 1.2. It's called Crisis on Infinite Earths. That's when I came into comic books, and DC has slowly walked themselves back over the last 2 decades to the concept of a multiverse, which drives me nuts. But that's a topic for another podcast. So I thought that was I was like, take that line, take that location in the script, and do something about the current MCU, right? That's the way to hook me, right? Or do another nod to like the Netflix universe.
Well, they did. Did you not catch it in this one? There was also a shout out to the Avengers. Scarborough, I believe, shouted out Rand and Stark.
Yes, yeah, I did that. Which was a shout out to both the big screen MCU as well as the Netflix universe. Yes, yeah, I did absolutely get that. So again, I liked the season finale. I meant to mention this for season 8, but all throughout this whole thing, great music. Like, I'm still not well, I guess I do get the why they're doing the season finale to a cover of "Sail Away" by Styx. Because eventually the characters are going to sail away and be believed to be dead, which is fine. But overall, I don't know how I feel about where this thing settled and about where they are. They're both apparently believed dead. They both collapse back to the church. That's a thing in the comics. They operate out of St. Teresa. But they're still in New Orleans. Also, we get that O'Reilly, who gets shot by Connors, a shot that hits a nearby terror valve, and you see her get blasted with the mist before she gets tumbled over into the bay, and then at the end come walking out of the bay with glowing yellow eyes. So I don't know. I think what I'd like to do is talk through the remainder of our time about the finale and how it wrapped up. And do we like it? Do we not like it? What does it mean? And how do we see this heading into season 2?
Scarborough, I believe, is dead. Right, that was another thing that we saw.
He's catatonic.
Or catatonic. Okay, I was very confused. I was like, is this dude dead or what?
Right. And I'm fine with catatonic. I mean, Hess was in that state for 8 years. That's a fitting.
Oh, the other thing that I wanted to mention was the end of O'Connor.
Right.
That was just so surprising, and I remember you telling me about his ability to put people inside the cloak. Right. And what better way to end the season finale with Cloak just having all sorts of mastery over his abilities, even to the extent I feel like he's now above Tandy in the things that he can do.
Yeah.
And the other thing was that I was shocked that they dropped the cloak and now his black thing is kind of Billy's sweater, which I think is a lot more cooler and modern to their look. Like, it would have been weird if he had the cloak and she was just kind of regular looking.
Yeah, it's weird, and this is where, again, it leaves me. So let me say the positive thing first, as you mentioned, right? I feel this is almost better than the Netflix shows. One of the things that this show does is it doesn't have this huge ensemble cast like some of the other shows have had. It doesn't, like, if you're gonna do, I mean, they have their PR photo, right, which has I kind of feel like it's a bunch of people sitting around, kind of like the Vampire Diaries or like the True Blood picture, right? Some of them are seated, some of them are standing. It's like a big family photo. But that ensemble cast doesn't carry that same like weight that you get when you look at like the Arrow cast picture or even the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Cast picture. Everybody kind of plays and picks in a certain lane, and they're not all crossing over each other. And really, quite honestly, and I think maybe it's because they don't all necessarily. One of the things this show does is it's very tight. There are not like 9 different arcs in this show. When you get a CW show, right, Felicity has a story arc, Oliver has a story, like all the characters are proceeding towards something in their own individual lane. Whereas this season, at least this show, this was about Cloak and Dagger, regardless of all the other people. And I feel like that's a thing that is different from the Netflix shows and from everything else.
Yeah. It was very much more focused on the central characters than it was on all these side characters, right? Because Jessica Jones, let's talk about Malcolm.
Right.
And
Hellcat. And
right. Hellcat, which it kind of got a bit tedious, right? And then you get in Luke Cage where you have to talk about, Pops. You have to talk about Misty. And, it gets kind of... And then also... you had to get into I forget Luke Cage's the scientist that was in the prison. We had to talk about her for a little bit.
Right.
And Daredevil, we got so much into the doctor lady and Bill. What was it? Billy? No.
Foggy.
Foggy. Yeah. Billy was the one.
And the Punisher.
Yeah, the Punisher and Medea.
Right.
I think that's her name. So we have all of these. Yeah, it's like this one. I was really glad because like I feel like they add those extra characters when they don't know what to do and they're low on budget. So right. I really appreciate that this is more focused on the central characters.
Yeah, and I think those side stories and every character having their own arc is the thing that leads us to say that like those Netflix shows are a slow burn, and you
Yes.
keep waiting for the character progression. Well, you're waiting for the character progression because you're wanting to see Jessica Jones move forward, right? But for every 5 minutes of drumbeat of Jessica Jones, you get 10 minutes of drumbeat of like Malcolm and Hellcat and her mom, right? I mean,
And the mom.
yeah. And so,
or that crazy doctor guy, right?
right. So like every 15 minutes, you come back to you come back to Jessica. So this show was a lot tighter, and that's a thing. But I'm really like, I don't know where this is going. And again, I've got the comics clouding my head a little bit, but I'm like, are they going to stay in New Orleans, or are they going to transplant to New York? I don't understand how they stay in New Orleans when everybody is on the hunt for Ty. I guess part of me says, like, and it's totally a comic book, well, that doesn't make sense, right? Nerd thing. I'm like, how can they stay hidden in St. Teresa's? Does nobody ever come in there? But I'm like, well, they were also in an abandoned church in New York, and they never got discovered, and the population density of New York is much greater than New Orleans. So I guess maybe I shouldn't worry too much about that, but I feel like I need them to leave and be orphans, and it's weird to me that they stayed. Very cool imagery with them winding up on top of the Superdome, by the way. But as you mentioned, I mean, is that really your theory that basically this is kind of a half season, and so we're really going to see the progression of like what they're really going to become in like the early part of season 2 to reset a new status quo?
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, that we're going to kind of finish up everything in New Orleans, and then we're going to see them. I don't know if I thought that Cloak was going to accidentally have this super, teleport them away, and they accidentally end up in New York. Like, that would have been awesome. And then the Cloak is like, oh shoot, I don't know how to teleport back to New Orleans, so I guess we're stuck in New York now. I hope they do that somehow in season 2, where he teleports and they just end up in New York, and they're like, well, shoot, we're here now. And then maybe that's when we kind of, like, I would love season 2 for them to go to New York, and then all of a sudden Luke Cage pops up. Like, that would be neat. Or it could be like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. with the one season we had of what's their names again? I'm so blanking on the Inhumans, right?
Okay, yeah.
It's a clear, direct reference. Each show is based off each other, but the the Inhumans and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. never have contact,
right,
at least so far.
Yeah, so I thought it was a good finale. So I thought it was a good finale, but like I said, I just don't know, where they're going to wind up.
Yeah. And season 2, I'm thinking that Cop could be kind of a short villain.
Yeah. So this is the thing I wanted to ask you, because you would know better than me. Have we gotten a Typhoid Mary?
No.
Okay.
Nope. You think she's going to become the Typhoid Mary? Is that what you're thinking?
It's in the ballpark, right? I mean, it seems like that could be the direction they're heading. I don't know. Was there a rumor of a Typhoid Mary being cast after Defenders?
Not that I've heard.
Okay.
The one theory that I heard, let's see, what was it? Cloak and Dagger. There was some speculations that there was this like swamp monster guy or this ethereal villain that could possibly be the villain for season 2.
Okay. I mean, so yeah, and as we're talking through it, this is, I guess, a little bit my worry, right? I don't want them to stay in New York, but haven't they done the perfect setup for them to stay in? I mean, for them to stay. I don't want them to stay in New Orleans, but haven't they done the perfect setup for them to stay in New Orleans, right?
At least for part of it.
That basically that series of pipes was kind of like their what I want to call it, their particle accelerator, right? That could have created all sorts of supervillains all over the world. So Blue Wonder in chat mentions that they think the closest crossover would be the Runaways, as we mentioned, that's a possibility. She thinks the cop becomes Mayhem. Now, I'm not familiar with that villain, so I'll definitely need to look that up. But very cool theory. Thanks very much, Blue Wonder, for joining in the live show and pitching us that theory.
Oh, Mayhem, is that a symbiote character? Just looking at the picture right now. I don't know. It looks like a symbiote.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't found a picture of them yet. I don't know. That is actually the character is that's the character in the comics. Bridget O'Reilly.
Okay, is Mayhem?
Yes, yeah. Appeared in Cloak and Dagger #1. Actually, a comic book that I read, but I've since forgotten. Yeah. So cool, very cool. She was the central villain in their in what I believe was their miniseries that they first appeared in their own comic in 1983. So very cool. So we have the answer to that. Dave, anything else that you would talk about with the finale or Cloak and Dagger? I think our next stick is we're gonna be getting together for the Gifted.
Yep, Gifted. I'm really wondering if we're gonna see any nods in the Gifted to the greater Marvel universe, and if so, could we possibly see, the ultimate crossovers coming? I would love to see, more sorts of crossovers, and also with the Titans, if that's going to have any sort of crossover to the CW or the DC movies.
Yeah, I feel like, everything we've seen from DC is that everything is a silo, so I don't know. Now, of course, the question is with the advent of their streaming service, are we going to see a lessening of that? I mean, the CW, the Arrowverse, has set a precedent where, like, there were call-outs to the Vixen cartoon series. So that's always a possibility. There's talk that as they introduce Batwoman, that will... and maybe one of the promos you can already see, like, I think maybe I've fallen off those shows, but I guess they've already started to, like, head nod and acknowledge the existence of a Batman in Gotham City.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm not sure. My guess on the Gifted is that the deal fell too late, and that the thing about the Gifted is they don't even necessarily acknowledge other things in the X-Men universe. So I think,
let alone the current Marvel universe.
Right. So I think we've got a while. Of course, I think that show might be the first indicator of what we're gonna do with the X-Men universe. Right now that I keep forgetting his name, but now that Bryan Singer is completely out of the picture. Who didn't really do that great job of knitting together a universe. I mean, he's really the reason why that universe is... I mean, using that term is almost a misnomer when you talk about the XCU, as with all the continuity that's broken and fragmented. And just when they solved it with Days of Future Past, they immediately broke it again with Logan. And I suspect that the same will be true of the New Mutants and Dark Phoenix if those movies come out. So... But The Gifted is a great, great, great standalone show. I'm reading the Weapon X series right now by... I'm going to forget who's doing it. Yeah, I don't know who's doing the Weapon X series. But I have been reading that series, and you have Warpath in there, and obviously you had Warpath in Days of Future Past. And I can't remember whether or not the guy in The Gifted is Warpath or Thunderbird, but he's one of the two. But both of those characters are like my two favorite X-Men, and we've gotten to see so very little of them. I mean, Thunderbird was killed basically 6 months after he showed up in the comic book, and Warpath we don't get to see that much of either. So definitely looking forward to seeing more of that. Polaris has the baby, I'm told, in the first episode. We've already seen that in promos.
Oh,
so
okay. I haven't seen the promos yet.
Yeah.
So you've seen more than I've seen.
Yeah.
So
I haven't even seen those. I just read the headlines about them. So
I do think I heard it was confirmed that there is a season 2 of Cloak and Dagger.
Okay.
So I think that's exciting. I think I heard it was going to be a whole year though. So
Yeah, I don't know how they're gonna. Well, we'll see what happens. Yeah, I don't know exactly how they would pull that off, but we'll see. We'll definitely keep our ear to the ground. This will definitely be one of the series, obviously, that we're going to keep tracking on from season to season. So that should be pretty cool. Anything else, Dave, that you want to mention before we get out of here?
I think that's good. We've got a whole hour under our belt.
All right, thanks so much, everybody, for joining in to this episode of It's Another Thing. This has been episode number 7 on behalf of the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube and my good friend, Mr. Dave Pecci, and the other co-hosts from the E2KG Network. Thanks so much for joining in. That's going to do it for us. Join us in, what are we talking, like 6 weeks-ish, near the end of September.
September 25th. So let's see.
We'll probably podcast either
that weekend, 28th or 29th.
Yeah, that weekend or the following weekend, depending on whether or not we group 2 episodes together. We'll be working that out. So
yeah, that's true because it's a 16 episode series. So
okay,
they're hour-long episodes too. I think wasn't it?
Yeah.
So
it's kind of like a Walking Dead length show.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. We'll definitely let you guys know how we're planning on handling that. But thanks so much for joining tonight. Blue Wonder, thanks so much for joining on the live show. We really loved having you available in chat. Hopefully, you will continue to join in the live show when we kick things off again with the next segment when we start tracking the Gifted in October. So thanks again for joining in. That's going to do it for us. We are out of here.